Welcome to the podcast series Inclusive Research and Innovation in Science, Technology, Engineering and Mathematics. My name is Claudia Werker and I'm an associate professor at Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. I host this podcast series on IRI in STEM. Today I welcome my colleague David Abbink. David is a full professor in haptic human-robot interaction. When looking at his affiliation, you can already see that his work is very inter- and transdisciplinary. He is affiliated with two different faculties at Delft University of Technology, namely mechanical engineering as well as industrial design engineering. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much, Claudia.
So please tell us a bit about your professional background and your research and innovation activities to start with.
All right. I was trained as a mechanical engineer, especially in sensory motor control. So understanding how we use our body to move and what information we work with, and that I looked at with control engineering goggles. Yeah? So I was trained like that. And then I used that information and that way of looking at the world to understand how we might interact physically with robots, driver support systems. Also in planes and remote controlled robots. And so I did a lot of my work, maybe 2 decades of work, very much in that disciplinary background, looking at humans interacting with machines that can take some kind of initiative and action. And then maybe the last 3 years, I started to become really interested in the future of work. That's my latest interest. I'll say much more about that.
Okay. What has been your major driving force to sort of switch focus, if I may say so?
I think looking back, for a very long time, I was very much interested, I guess, performing some way or another. And with that, I mean, I liked getting into personal grants and being really good at my discipline. And I didn't feel so much what it is that I wanted to spend my time on. It felt like it was me. And it was, of course, to some extent. But when I became full professor, and you hold your inaugural lecture, and for me, that was a moment to stop a bit of the rat race that I felt in hindsight, and think about where I want to spend my time and my talents and my effort. And that, allowed me a lot of time, or at least I created that space for myself to go back into the founding elements of my domain, human-robot interaction. And I was intrigued how mathematicians and control engineers work together with my favorite anthropologists. And I thought, wow, these people know each other. And that was in the cybernetics movement just after the Second World War. And it was so radically interdisciplinary. I thought, what happened to that? How can it be that I, as a human-robot interaction expert, but trained as an engineer, am the expert on human behavior? I'm not. I wasn't trained as a psychologist or as a social scientist in any way. So where are those people actually? Why aren't we not inviting them more? And vice versa. Why are we not invited more into that domain? So that was the start, you could say, of my curiosity around broadening different disciplinary perspectives. And that was a whole journey of 3 years that took me now, I think, to the point where it's not just looking at different academic disciplines, so interdisciplinarity, but also taking into account the knowledge integration with more pragmatic experts. So mingling that we call transdisciplinarity. And then a lot of questions about who do you include during your research activities? How do you include people? How do you include innovators in the innovation process? And so this kind of thinking about the connections and the relations and what constitutes evidence, what's allowed to be said, becomes very much at the forefront. Yeah.
Right. If you now could determine what the coolest result would be that you can achieve. So you can it's wishful thinking now. What would be the coolest result you could achieve with your kind of research that you are doing now?
Well, I think the coolest would be if we are able to give workers, so people who actually do work on the work floor in organizations, like, I don't know, nursing work or cleaning work, or if we could give them a real creative and decision-making voice in the development of any kind of technological assistance. That's not done enough, and And I think it would be great if we can find out some way of working that produces both good innovation and scientific progress, as well as real experienced benefits on the work floor. And if we can somehow find a constellation of doing that, I'd be super happy. Yeah.
Yeah, full disclosure, David and I have been working together before on a vision team robots at work. And there, of course, also the question popped up that I'm asking you now. How do you consider the diversity of human beings in the sense of age, physical ability, gender, and the like in your work?
It's a very good question. A disclaimer, I don't think we do it enough at this stage already. So what we do try to do is make a lot of effort to include any kind of perspectives on the work floor into our research. And with that I mean, typically as engineer, I was trained to go into an organization, take a snapshot of the work, and then quickly translate that to important research questions. And not really thinking about how to reason through the impact for those involved. And so I think our first step was to find methodologies and tools and processes by which we could not just get workers around the table for a co-creation session and then go home or something, but to really include them throughout the whole research process. And then automatically you get a lot of diversity in perspectives, all sorts of different perspectives from different cultural backgrounds, different gender, even different socioeconomic backgrounds, but even different beliefs about, what constitutes good work for them. Mm-hmm. So to make it a little bit less flat, so what's good work, and all sorts of assumptions about what, workers would want. I think if you really not just talk to them once or do an interview once, but take them throughout, you get a lot of richness in why people do the work they do and what they hope to be able to do. And so I think that was our starting point, and I think we're relatively successful in making progress there. But of course, as soon as we think about different ways to organize work, perhaps with different technological interventions like robotic systems, then also it opens up new opportunities for different kind of backgrounds on the workplace. And so far we haven't done enough of that yet, but that's certainly on my ambition list. So to kind of think, if we change, what then would be possible, and how could we use any kind of innovations in the workplace as agents of change in increasing the inclusion and diversity of different kinds of people.
Could you give us one example of what you already achieved doing what you did, talking to stakeholders on the work floor on a regular basis? How did this change the actual technological solutions you provided?
So far, I must admit, so it's a slow process. So far, I don't think we have closed the loop, as we say, on doing a different kind of process. Then also seeing that yields different technology that also gets implemented and that we can also see the impact of that implementation. And so that takes years.
Yeah.
And we have not worked for so many years yet. Now, I do feel very strongly about two kind of early indicators of impact. And one was where we were at Erasmus Medical Center working with nurses, where also the request was, we have labor shortages in nursing. So David, can't you make a robot that somehow helps? And then we included many different disciplinary perspectives to work with the nurses for, in this case, 3 months. And interestingly, they said, this is the first time that innovation is done with us. So typically it's done with surgeons or, but so with us, it is the first time we experienced it. And they kind of, at first a little bit hesitant. And then after a while, they started to see that we were genuinely intrigued and genuinely, as we learned more about their work, we started to see more and more how incredibly expert they were in tying everything together. And so what I first thought, nursing work, well, what is that? I actually had a very flat image of, and then we learned more and more and more. And that changed something in the way they opened up. And so that was a kind of reciprocal, I don't know how to say it, so a positive feedback loop where we got to know each other quite well. And we included that also with the management team. And really beautiful things were said at the kind of integrative meetings that we organized to bring them together, where things were said to each other that were not said otherwise. For example, we were saying to everybody publicly how impressed we were with how nurses call them masters in the workaround. So everything's chaotic, right? But they make sure everything works, and it's always unpredictable. Of course, you never know how many patients come in and how long everything takes, and so. But they make sure everything runs smoothly.
Right.
And then, yes, the management team recognized that. We're just really scared that when we do some kind of technological intervention, that the management says that we'll have more time with patients, but we will, we're kind of doubtful of that because we'll just have to work even more patients because that's typically what happens. You have to be even more efficient. And the management then said, oh, yes, well, actually, that's also a really huge challenge for us, how to make it work at scale.
Yeah.
And that was a kind of honesty that went beyond, we do innovation, it will be beneficial for you and for the patient. No, there's real struggles. And so for me, that was very meaningful and powerful to see honesty at a different level coming up through this way of working. Now, how that relates to technological change, we don't know yet, because different use cases were proposed in different ways. But one of the beautiful things is that out of that came so much enthusiasm to work in this transdisciplinary way with sufficient time and sufficient different perspectives that now we can work for 2 years at least.
Oh, great.
So that means it was a little seed of change. And through that, hopefully, by the end of those 2 years, we'll have some kind of intervention, perhaps technological, perhaps organizational, that actually brings real benefit to their work process. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting also because that links very beautifully to what we are investigating usually, responsible research and innovation. Yes. So being responsible for who?
Yep.
For the patients, for the nurses, for the hospital, for also cost aspects. So combining economic and ethical issues in a way that you can say, well, we are doing justice to all aspects and not only to some.
Yes.
Yeah. Very nice.
Yeah, it's very related. I think transdisciplinarity is one, responsible research and innovation. Some people call it not just alpha, beta, and gamma, but delta science, so integrative. And so I think they're or systemic engineering or design. And so I think there's a kind of recognition from different perspectives how important it is to not just look at one aspect like efficiency, or not just look only at the patients or only at the economic viability, but try to see the whole and work with that whole.
Right. I mean, I'm now broadening it up a bit more, and you know that because we have been talking about that before. I wonder, of course, we have rather a lot of industrial working spaces that are dominated by male workers, sometimes even exclusively having male workers working there, and these are usually well-paid and also well-educated jobs that traditionally also involved quite a lot of physical work. But of course, given that robots can certainly help with that, I'm very much interested how you look at that. Could we broaden our workforce potential in that respect? And that would be, I guess, very welcome, because currently we face the situation that the working force is getting older and also not sufficient new young people are coming in. So it would be nice, for example, to involve female workers, but also keep workers who are getting older and would in the old days be not physically fit enough to do this kind of work still. So how is your view on that?
Well, first of all, I learned from working with the nurses that a lot of physical work is not necessarily performed only by males. Very heavy physical work is done by females as well. We work across different sectors. What you paint the picture about kind of a male-dominant work environment was certainly the case for baggage handling. Mm-hmm. It's much less so for nursing. It's kind of, in my perception, I don't have the numbers, but more equal around cleaning. But so the question around diversity is not just physical capabilities, and we found out it's also quite difficult to have robots help in a workflow that as soon as you change something, many other aspects need to change as well. And with that, I mean, one of the work contexts that we also worked in was engine repair and maintenance. Now, this is such a environment where indeed it's a lot of relatively old male workers, or around the 50s, something like that have worked in that for decades, have huge skills, but it's physically so demanding that many of them have troubles with their shoulders. So they need to blend, they call this, as kind of filing of engine blades to go into airplanes. And so you could think, well, if we make that lighter, maybe other people can do that work. But it's actually really skilled work. So you can't just fly in
right.
somebody else.
Or
right?
they can keep doing it and train the others.
Exactly. So it's a long-term perspective, actually. And so right now we're working with somebody who almost can only train people a little bit, but not do the physical work himself. This would, so if we have kind of assistive robotics that maybe do 80% of the force, but all the fine manipulation is still literally in his hands,
right?
Then he would be able to work a bit more. And perhaps that would indeed, if we have such a process, it would open up the work floor for people with who are less physically strong. But I guess what I wanted to say with this whole story is that there's also a kind of deep mastery of skill that is not just physical. So,
right.
so indeed it takes still training, and it's still, you need to understand the organization and the work processes. But that's our hope, that we would be able to, through robotics, open up potential range of employees that you might consider for this work. Yeah.
Right. We did a master thesis with your help in the baggage area as well. And what we found very striking was exactly that this is skilled work, but also that workers take a huge pride in doing their work and being on time and doing the baggage handling on time so that the passengers can always have their baggage in time. So that was also very nice. And that leads me to my next question, because when I got to know you, you were always talking about how to keep people happy while using robotics, instead of talking about how to make their work more efficient, talking about how to make them more happy in their work. Could you elaborate a bit on that?
Yes, indeed. I think many people who do physical work, they take pride in what they do. They're masters in what they do. And what I learned as an academic, I had actually very little clue about what that work was. And so when I learned about baggage handling work, I thought, it must be terrible in the dark and bad labor conditions, and nobody cares about them. And to some extent, this is true. And yet, to another extent, once engaging with them, there's indeed this sense of pride that comes up. People you see really pushing their limits to do their job well, and they get great satisfaction. And so what is a very real risk is that as engineers, we try to lighten the load somehow or make things more efficient, as if everybody's interested in making things more smooth or efficient or lighter. And typically, in order to do that, we need to standardize to some extent, thereby make the job more boring. And therefore, indeed, thinking about what makes work fun and how to keep people happy, then you need to broaden up your range of what you're supporting. Are you just supporting forces and positions? That's how I was taught to look at the world. Yeah? Or do you take the whole breadth of what it means to work into account? And then all sorts of other ways of scientific research are important to figure out, what do people imagine their work could be, and why? How do they maintain their balance between resources and demands, and how do change and implementation actually occur in processes, and who's at the table to make decisions? And so then the question, how do you keep people happy with technology, is a very different question than how do you make things more efficient. So I haven't found the answers yet, but at least I found a lot of great people to work along on this big question.
Right.
like yourself.
Thank you. You have already hinted quite a bit at your inter and transdisciplinary work. Could you elaborate a bit on which kind of researchers from other disciplines you are working, which are those disciplines, but also with whom outside the university you work? I mean, you already mentioned some companies, but would it also be beneficial, for example, to talk to policymakers who often make the rules we all have to adhere to?
Yeah. So there's many types of answers to that question. So first of all, who do we work with together? I think what we try to do is bring to the table the relevant disciplinary perspectives from an academic side. So that's one chunk. from the academic side, relevant perspectives that can think about the triangulation, as we call it, between technology, workers, and the organization. And when you go to a work floor, then that's at least what you will see. Any kind of work floor. You'll see kind of technological solutions, people working there, and an organization that provides, the container, let's say, and the adaptation mechanisms. And so we include engineers who typically look forward together with designers, and social scientists, both quantitative, like work and organizational psychologists, and also qualitative, so organizational change scholars that use more ethnographic methods typically, and bring those people together to experience the same phenomena on the work floor. So, and interestingly, everybody sees something else. And so what we do together is then, because we have the same, we're exposed to the same phenomena, but experience something different, by talking about that, we produce our blind spots. And we mix that together with workers in that context. So we have a team of workers like that. And that's how it's basically our way of thinking about it. And then to make that happen, we need a consortium of scientists from all sorts of different backgrounds, from 5 different universities: Delft, Eindhoven, and Twente as technical universities, and Erasmus University and Radboud University, that bring us social science deep expertise. And indeed, we also link that together with organizations that we work with: KLM, Schiphol, Erasmus Medical Center, being the main sponsor so far. And we link that to, for example, Arbo-Unie, and indeed policymakers to some extent. We're working with Ministry of Economic Affairs. So it's actually, we're trying to gather a consortium of people who take joint, shared responsibility about shaping the future of work. Because you need all these people at the table, I think, to shape this future of work and not just let it happen or make macroeconomic forecasts. That's at high level, and there's much more there. We have ethicists and economists as well. But I would say that that's the core of the people we include.
So basically what David is doing, he is creating his own innovative ecosystem on the topic worker-robot relationships.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and we link that also with expertise of innovators who actually pragmatically know how to do innovation processes with companies. So we work with Robohouse here at the TU Delft campus. And at the Erasmus Medical Center, for example, with Create for Care. It's also an innovation hub there. At Schiphol, we work with their innovation hub. So it's kind of realizing that kind of these long-term academic streams need to merge somehow with the more short-term impact-driven innovation expertise. And then you're ready to engage with organizations that are, so... There you go. Yeah, it's quite a puzzle.
Yes, indeed. We could, of course, go on for ages on that in more detail, but let's say we wrap it up here. Yeah. But given our conversation, is there anything you would like to share with us that you did not have the chance to do?
Thanks for that opportunity. Actually, yes. So I think what I described is, I spoke very much from my rational mind, so kind of describing the parts and how they're related and what's important. But I think this way of working, responsible research and innovation, or this kind of transdisciplinary practices in research, also requires a lot of reflection and I would say personal development, both from the people who do it for 40 hours a week, maybe the PhDs or the postdocs or the senior researchers, but also the academic mentors, the promoters. It takes a lot. So this way of working and really taking it seriously to see through academic processes and the merging of that into some kind of joint perspective on real world problems. It's a fascinating personal journey as well. So I learned a lot about how I come across and how I can make things happen and not. And I would say it's such an enriching experience to work in this way that also makes me connect more. And so we're talking about inclusivity and diversity. So for me, inclusion is also, do I feel at home? And do the people that I work with feel at home in the work we do? And I think by paying a lot of attention to that, sometimes it seems it takes too much time, or it used to be much more efficient when I, when I wrote the paper, because I just did this study and then with 1 year it's published. This takes a lot longer and it takes patience. But But I think it's very rewarding to work in this way for me. And I see that in the people working along with me and inspiring me that I learn from, that this is something that I hope gains more traction in the future in our research community at Delft.
Yeah, me too, because I can only second what you are saying. Thank you once again for contributing to our podcast series on inclusive research and innovation in STEM.